The probate hearing hadn't even started, and my cousin was already smiling like she owned the air. Her name is Bria, the kind of cousin who shows up only when there's money, then acts like she's been loyal all along. She wore a cream blazer that cost more than my monthly groceries and leaned close enough for me to smell her perfume. Enjoy your homeless life, bitch, she hissed, soft and delighted. A few people behind her snickered like this was just family banter, like cruelty was a tradition you clapped for. My parents didn't stop her. They stood a few feet back, my mother, Lorna, with her tight little smile, and my father, Dean, staring past me like I was a stain on the courthouse carpet. They looked calm, certain, like the ending had already been agreed on without me. I didn't answer Bria. I didn't even look at her. I kept my eyes on the courtroom door and held my folder against my ribs the way you hold something fragile and sharp at the same time. Because I knew what they were counting on. They wanted me loud. They wanted me messy. They wanted me to look like exactly what they'd been whispering to everyone in our family for years: unstable, dramatic, unreliable. So, I gave them nothing. The bailiff opened the door and called the case. Everyone shuffled in, the way people do when they think something is about to happen that isn't their problem. I sat at the petitioner's table with my attorney, Nadia Sloan, who had the kind of calm that only comes from reading too many lies in nice handwriting. Across from us, my parents sat with Bria and their attorney. Bria kept glancing over like she wanted me to break, just so she could win twice. Judge Kessler took the bench and looked down at the file, eyes tired but sharp. "Good morning," he said. "This is the matter of the estate of Harold Price." My grandfather. Hearing his name in that room made something twist in my chest. Not grief. Grief was already a constant. This was something else. The feeling of strangers turning a life into a folder. Judge Kessler adjusted his glasses. "Appearances for the record," Nadia stood. "Nadia Sloan for the petitioner, Hannah Price." I stood when she said my name, chin level, hands still. On the other side, their attorney stood. Mitchell Crane for Lorna and Dean Price, and Bria Donnelly. Bria's smile sharpened at the sound of her own name in court, like being spoken into the record made her real. Judge Kessler glanced between us. I understand there is a dispute regarding the decedent's residence and certain personal property," he said. "And I also understand there are allegations of concealment of assets." My mother's attorney didn't waste time. He stepped forward like he'd rehearsed the rhythm. "Your Honor," Crane said, "my clients believe Ms. Price has been living in the decedent's home and withholding estate property. We are requesting immediate surrender of the premises and an inventory of all items in her possession." My mother nodded dramatically, like she was suffering through my behavior. Bria leaned back in her chair, satisfied, like the word surrender tasted sweet. Judge Kessler turned his gaze to me. "Ms. Price," he said, "do you dispute living in the home?" "I live there," I said evenly. "Grandpa asked me to." Crane pounced. "Convenient," he said, glancing at the judge. "But there is no written agreement, and my clients, his children, were excluded." My father's face didn't change. My mother's eyes stayed locked on mine, daring me to react. Judge Kessler held up a hand. "I'll review the estate file," he said. "Clerk, pull up the record." The clerk, Ms. Patel, clicked her mouse and turned her monitor slightly toward the bench. The faint glow of the screen reflected in Judge Kessler's glasses. And that was the moment Bria leaned toward me again, voice low enough to feel private even in a courtroom. "After today," she whispered, "you'll be sleeping in your car." I didn't look at her. I opened my folder, slid out one document, one sealed page in a plain envelope, and placed it on the table in front of Nadia. Nadia didn't look surprised. She simply stood and approached the bench with the envelope held carefully, like it wasn't paper, like it was a switch. "Your Honor," she said, "before the clerk proceeds, we have a document that must be added to the record." Crane's head snapped up. "What document?" Nadia didn't answer him. She handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to the clerk. Ms. Patel opened the envelope, her eyes scanning the first line. Her posture changed slightly, tiny but visible. like she'd just realized she was holding something heavier than it looked. She clicked. The courtroom's projector screen flickered as the file loaded onto the system. A clean interface, a new attachment, and then a single header line that made the judge sit up straighter. Judge Kessler's face changed. Not slowly, not subtly. Like someone had pulled the floor back and shown him what was underneath. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then looked over the top of his glasses at my mother. "Ms. Price?" he said, voice suddenly sharper. "Did you file an emergency petition in this case 2 days before Mr. Price passed away?" My mother blinked twice, mouth parting. Crane stepped forward fast. "Your Honor, I'm not sure what—" Judge Kessler held up a hand without looking away from my mother. "I'm asking her," he said. Bria's smile had vanished completely now. Her eyes flicked to the screen like she was trying to read it from 10 feet away. My mother's voice came out thin. I don't know what you're talking about." Judge Kessler tapped the screen with his pen once. "The system shows a filing," he said. "Time-stamped, verified, and tied to a user account associated with your email address." Crane's confidence faltered for the first time. "Your Honor, we need to see exactly what this is." Judge Kessler's gaze cut to him. "You will," he said. "In a moment." Then he turned back to the clerk. "Open the next attachment," he ordered. Ms. Patel clicked again. The screen loaded a new document, and the courtroom went so quiet, I could hear the bailiff's keys shift at his belt. Judge Kessler read the first line, then the second. His jaw tightened. And when he finally looked up, his eyes went past my mother, past Bria, past their attorney, and landed directly on me. "Miss Price," he said slowly, "who prepared this filing?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. I just answered the truth that my family never planned for. "My grandfather did," I said. "With his attorney? Before he died." Part 2/5. The moment I said it, my grandfather did, with his attorney, the confidence on the other side of the room started to leak out like air from a tire. Judge Kessler didn't look impressed. He looked insulted, like someone had tried to use his courtroom as a vending machine. "Ms. Patel," he said to the clerk, "expand the docket entry. I want the full filing history." The clerk clicked. The projector refreshed. A list populated, dates, titles, attachments, everything stacked neatly the way courts stack people's lives into folders. Mitchell Crane leaned forward, voice quick. "Your Honor, I object. This is outside the scope of today's—" Judge Kessler lifted a hand without even turning his head. "Sit down," he said. Crane sat. My mother's mouth tightened. My father's jaw worked like he was chewing on panic. Bria's eyes stayed locked on the screen, trying to read it from the gallery like she could undo it through willpower. The judge pointed with his pen. "Here," he said. "An emergency petition, filed 2 days before the date of death, and verified." He looked straight at my mother. "Ms. Price, did you file this petition under penalty of perjury?" My mother's eyes widened with practiced innocence. "No," she said quickly. "Absolutely not. I don't even know what that is." I didn't react. I didn't look at Bria. I stared at the judge and waited because I knew what would happen next. Courts don't run on feelings. They run on records. Judge Kessler's voice stayed calm, but the calm had steel in it. "Miss Patel," he said, "open the petition, page 1. The clerk clicked again. A form filled the screen. Bold headers, blocks of text, signature lines. Nobody could read every word from where we sat, but you didn't need to. The structure alone told the story. Judge Kessler read silently for a few seconds. Then he looked up again, slower this time. "This petition requests emergency appointment of a temporary conservator," he said, voice low. "It alleges that Harold Price was vulnerable, incapacitated, and being exploited." My stomach stayed steady, but something cold moved behind my ribs. Because that was the accusation they'd been spreading for months, just never with a judge listening. Judge Kessler continued, eyes still on the screen. It also requests removal of the occupant from the residence, he said. Immediate possession, with law enforcement assistance if necessary. Bria's mouth twitched like she'd just tasted victory again, until the judge read the next line. And it identifies the alleged exploiter as, he glanced down, Hannah Price. My name, in black ink, on a legal claim my mother swore was urgent. My mother's face stayed frozen, but I saw her throat move as she swallowed. Judge Kessler looked up at her again. Ms. Price, and he said, your name appears as petitioner, your address, your phone number, and there is an electronic verification attached. Crane stood up again, voice tight now. Your Honor, identity theft is not unheard of. Someone could have. Judge Kessler's gaze snapped to him. Counsel, he said sharply, I'm not asking you to improvise excuses. I'm asking your client a direct question. Crane's mouth closed. The judge turned back to my mother. Stand, he ordered. Lorna stood like she was offended by having to obey. Raise your right hand, the judge said. And the bailiff stepped closer, ready to swear her in if needed. My mother hesitated, then lifted her hand, eyes flashing. Judge Kessler didn't bother with theater. If I determine you filed a false petition with false statements, that is perjury, he said. Do you understand? My mother's voice came out thinner. Yes. Did you file it? No, she said again, louder this time. I did not. The judge held her gaze for a beat that felt like a blade. Then he said, sit. My mother sat hard. And now, the judge added, we open the attachment Ms. Reed submitted. He nodded to Nadia. Nadia stood and spoke like a scalpel. Your Honor, my client is not here to argue with family members who weaponize gossip. She is here to let the record speak. The sealed page we submitted is the decedent's directive to the court prepared while he was alive. She with counsel, after he discovered the emergency petition had been filed. Crane's face tightened. Directive? Judge Kessler leaned forward. Open it, he said. Ms. Patel clicked. A new document loaded. Letterhead formatting, a formal declaration. The clerk scrolled. The judge read, eyes moving faster now, his expression changing with each line. He stopped, tapped his pen once, then looked at my father. Mr. Price, he said, this directive states that your wife attempted to petition this court for conservatorship and eviction using a login tied to your home internet account. My father's face went pale. Crane stammered, Your Honor, that's... Judge Kessler didn't let him finish. Ms. Patel, he said, open Exhibit 2. Click. A screenshot-style page appeared, again unreadable in fine detail from the gallery, but the layout was obvious. A Logan audit trail, timestamps, an IP address, a two-factor verification log. Judge Kessler read it aloud anyway, because he wanted the room to hear the shape of the truth. Login initiated, he said. Verification is sent to a phone number ending in... He paused, eyes narrowing. Matching the contact number on record for Bria Donnelly. My cousin's head snapped up. What? She blurted. The judge's gaze cut to her like a warning shot. Do not speak, he said. Bria's mouth closed, but her eyes were wide now. Wide in the way people get when they realize the system remembers what they hoped would disappear. My mother turned slightly, staring at Bria, her smile gone. My father stared straight ahead, breathing shallow. I kept my hands flat on the table. I kept my face still. I let the evidence do what it was designed to do. Judge Kessler looked at the clerk again. There's more, sir, he said. Ms. Patel scrolled. Another exhibit. This appears to be a sworn statement, the judge said slowly, from Harold Price's attorney, affirming that Mr. Price was competent, that he feared retaliation, and that he prepared an updated estate plan because of attempted interference. Crane tried one last angle. Your Honor, even if there was a misunderstanding before death, the will is still... Counsel, the judge interrupted, and his voice was colder now. A party who comes into this court with unclean hands does not get to demand equitable relief. Silence hit the room like a door slamming shut. Then Judge Kessler said the sentence that made Bria's earlier whisper feel pathetic. I am referring this filing to the district attorney, he said. Potential perjury, potential fraudulent filing, potential identity misuse, and attempted unlawful eviction. My mother's face went rigid, the way it does when someone is trying not to crack in front of strangers. Bria's fingers curled around her purse strap like she might run. The judge turned to Nadia. Ms. Sloan, he said, is the decedent's counsel present? Nadia's lips barely moved. He is, she said. The courtroom doors opened again, and a man stepped in wearing a dark suit and carrying a slim briefcase like it weighed nothing, because he'd already won the hard part days ago. He walked to the front, nodded at the judge, and said clearly, Grant Vila, attorney for Harold Price. Your Honor, I can authenticate every exhibit. And I can also tell the court what Harold recorded the day he realized his family was trying to remove Hannah from the home. Bria made a small, strangled sound. The judge looked at the clerk. Cue it, he said. Ms. Patel's mouse clicked. The screen went black for half a second, then began to load a video file. And my mother leaned back in her chair, eyes locked on the screen, as if she already knew exactly what my grandfather had said, and exactly who he was saying it about. Part 3/5. The projector screen stayed black for a beat, like the courtroom itself was holding its breath. Then the video loaded. A grainy frame appeared. My grandfather at his kitchen table. Daylight coming through blinds, a cardigan on his shoulders like he'd been cold. The camera angle was low, propped against something steady enough to feel intentional. His face filled the screen, tired but clear-eyed. Not confused, not incapacitated. Just angry in the quiet way he always got when someone tried to take something that wasn't theirs. Judge Kessler leaned forward without meaning to. The whole room leaned with him. Grandpa looked into the camera and spoke, slow and firm. My name is Harold Price, he said. I'm recording this because I just found out a petition was filed in my name, and my daughter is pretending she didn't do it. A ripple went through the courtroom, small, involuntary. Even Bria's friends in the gallery stopped shifting. Grandpa continued, voice steady. I am of sound mind. I know what day it is. I know my address. And I know exactly who is trying to remove Hannah from my house. My name hit the room like a stone dropping into still water. Bria's head snapped toward my mother. My mother kept her eyes locked on the screen like she could outstare it into silence. Grandpa reached to the side, pulled something into frame. Paper. A printed page. He held it up and tapped it with one finger. This is the filing receipt, he said. Date and time. It came through my home internet, and the code went to Bria's phone. Even through the cheap projector speakers, you could hear the disgust in his voice when he said my cousin's name. Bria's mouth opened. No sound came out. Grandpa lowered the paper. I asked Lorna to explain, he said. She lied to my face. Then she told me Hannah was using me and needed to be removed before court could see the truth. The words didn't sound dramatic coming from him. They sounded factual, like he was writing down a weather report. Judge Kessler's jaw tightened. He glanced at the clerk, then back at the screen. Ms. Patel's hands were still on the mouse, frozen mid-scroll. On the video, Grandpa took a breath and looked slightly off camera. I told them no, he said, and they didn't accept it. His eyes hardened. So I called my attorney, I updated my estate plan, and I instructed him to file the evidence because I'm not leaving my granddaughter to be bullied out of her home by people who show up only when there's money. My throat tightened, but my face didn't change. I kept my hands flat on the table and let the record carry my emotions for me. Grandpa leaned forward slightly. Hannah moved him because I asked her, he said. She pays the bills she can. She takes me to appointments. She makes sure I eat. She's been here when my own daughter was too busy counting what she thinks she's owed. The gallery went dead quiet, not even a cough. Then Grandpa said the line that made my stomach turn cold, not because it hurt, but because it confirmed how far they'd been willing to go. They tried to tell a judge I was being exploited, and he said, voice steady. Then they tried to tell me I was losing my mind. Then they tried to remove my phone. The judge's head snapped up at that. His gaze flicked to my mother so fast it looked like a reflex. Grandpa's mouth tightened. Lorna said, "If you can't call anyone, you can't stop it." Bria laughed, like it was clever. My cousin's face drained of color. Her hands gripped her purse strap like she might rip it off. Grandpa looked straight into the lens again. "If anything happens to me," he said, "Asha, it is not because Hannah did it. It is because my daughter and my niece are trying to rush this estate before the court can see what they've done." Judge Kessler lifted a hand slightly, instinctively, like he wanted to stop the video and ask questions through the screen. But Grandpa wasn't finished. He reached for another sheet of paper and held it up, closer to the camera this time. The top looked like a list: headings, lines, boxes. The details weren't readable from where we sat, but the format screamed inventory. "I made a list," Grandpa said. "A full one, photos, serial numbers, where everything is kept. Because if they get into this house and things start disappearing, I want the court to know exactly what went missing and exactly who had access." My pulse stayed steady. My cousin had told me I'd be homeless. Ati Grandpa had prepared for that threat like it was a predictable storm. He lowered the list and leaned back. His voice softened, not with weakness, but with exhaustion. "Hannah," he said, and my throat tightened hard because he was speaking to me even though he wasn't in the room. "Don't fight them with your mouth, fight them with paper." Then he added, quieter, "And don't let them near the drawer under the pantry shelf. They'll look for it when they panic." My mother's head jerked slightly like she'd heard a keyword. Judge Kessler's eyes narrowed. Grandpa looked away for a second, like he was listening to someone in the room with him, then looked back to the camera. "My attorney can explain the rest," he said. "But I'm saying this plainly. They do not get the house by bullying Hannah out. They do not get to invent a story and have the court stamp it." He paused, then said the last thing in the clip, voice calm and final. "And if they come into court and pretend they didn't file that petition, they are lying under oath." The video ended. The screen went black again. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. It was like the room had to remember how to function after hearing a dead man speak like that. Then Judge Kessler exhaled slowly and said, very quietly, "All right. Not comfort. Not sympathy. Decision." He looked at Grant Vela. "Mr. Vela," he said, "you're authenticating this video." "Yes, Your Honor," Grant replied immediately. "It was recorded on Mr. Price's device provided directly to my office. We preserved the original file and metadata. Chain of custody is documented." The judge nodded once, then turned to my mother. "Ms. Price," he said, voice suddenly sharp, "stand." My mother stood like she had no choice, which for once she didn't. "Your attorney can stop talking for you," the judge said. "You can stop lying for yourself. Did you file that petition?" My mother's lips parted. Her eyes darted toward Crane like he could pull a new reality out of his briefcase. Crane stood, voice tight. "Your Honor, my client." "Sit," Judge Kessler snapped. Crane sat. Bria made a small sound beside my mother, half gasp, half plea. "Aunt Lorna." The judge's eyes cut to her. "You," he said, pointing with his pen, "will not speak again unless I ask you a direct question." Bria froze. Judge Kessler looked back at Ms. Patel. "Clerk," he said, "print the verification log and the petition receipt. Now." Ms. Patel's printer whirred behind the bench. Eyeing the judge's gaze moved to the bailiff. "Bailiff," he said, "I want phones collected." My mother blinked. "Collected?" "Yes," the judge said, flat. "From the parties associated with the filing and verification. Right now. You are on notice that evidence preservation is required." My cousin's hand flew to her purse like it was instinct. The bailiff stepped forward, and for the first time since Bria whispered that disgusting sentence in my ear, her confidence cracked completely. Her eyes darted around the courtroom like she was looking for an exit that didn't exist. Because the court wasn't listening to her mouth anymore. It was listening to the record. And the record had just started to speak back. Part 4/5. The bailiff moved down the row with his hand out like a metronome. "Phones," he said, neutral, "on the table. I now." My mother hesitated like she was waiting for someone to remind the courtroom who she thought she was. Bria didn't hesitate. She clutched her purse tighter. Judge Kessler watched that tiny movement and didn't soften. Ms. Donnelly, he said, if you make me say it twice, you will regret it. Bria's chin lifted, offended. Your Honor, I'm not a party to. Yes, the judge cut in. You are. The verification log ties to your number. That makes you relevant. Hand it over. Bria's eyes flashed to her attorney. Crane opened his mouth. The judge didn't even look at him. Not one word, he said. Not until I'm finished preserving evidence. Bria swallowed. Slowly, painfully, she slid her phone out of her purse and placed it on the table like it burned. My mother did the same, but with a performance, sighing, rolling her eyes, letting the whole room feel how unfair it was. Judge Kessler didn't care about her feelings. He cared about her fingerprints. Clerk, he said, print the verification log, print the filing receipt, print the audit trail showing the IP address and the user account. The printer behind the bench started spitting paper like it couldn't wait to be useful. On the screen, Ms. Patel expanded the audit entries. Again, nobody could read the tiny text from the gallery, but the structure was unmistakable. Timestamps, login attempts, verification events, a series of actions that only looked innocent if you'd never touched a computer. Judge Kessler spoke as he read, because he wanted this burned into the record. Logan from Home IP, he said. User account associated with Lorna Price. Verification sent to a phone ending in. He paused, matching Bria Donnelly's number. Verification confirmed. Petition submitted. He looked up at my mother. You denied filing it, he said. Under oath? My mother's face went tight. Because I didn't, she snapped. Someone could have used my Wi-Fi. People hack things. The judge stared at her like she'd just tried to convince him gravity was optional. Then explain why the verification was confirmed from Bria's phone, he said. Bria's voice cracked out before she could stop it. I didn't confirm anything. Judge Kessler's eyes snapped to her. Do you want to be sworn in? He asked, cold. Because if you do, you'll be accountable for every word you say next. Bria's mouth closed. Her hands trembled slightly around the edge of the table. Crane stood, carefully controlled. Your Honor, even if the petition was improperly filed, today's issue is the will and the house. My clients. No, Judge Kessler interrupted, and his voice turned sharp enough that the gallery flinched. Today's issue is that someone attempted to weaponize this court against a lawful occupant using a false emergency petition. That is not a side issue. That is an attack on the integrity of this proceeding. My father shifted beside my mother for the first time, like he wanted to disappear into his own suit. The judge turned toward Grant Vela. Mr. Vela, he said, you stated there's additional evidence. Grant nodded once and opened his briefcase with quiet confidence. He didn't pull out a dramatic envelope. He pulled out certified copies. The court has just heard Mr. Price's video statement, Grant said. I can also provide the signed declaration from my office, plus metadata preservation, plus the recorded call log from the day Mr. Price notified us of the fraudulent petition. And, Your Honor, I have a certified copy of the updated estate plan executed shortly after. My mother's attorney tried to regain ground. Updated estate plan, Crane repeated quickly. We haven't been served with. Grant's eyes didn't move. It was filed with the court the day it was executed, he said, because Mr. Price anticipated interference. The judge looked to the clerk. Do we have it? Ms. Patel clicked twice, then nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Open it, Judge Kessler said. The document loaded on the screen. It looked like every formal instrument that changes people's lives. Headings, paragraphs, signature blocks, dates. Judge Kessler read silently at first. Then his eyes narrowed. He leaned closer, as if the words were unbelievable even when printed. And then he read one sentence out loud, slowly. Any beneficiary who contests this plan or attempts to remove Hannah Price from the residence shall be deemed to have disclaimed their interest. My mother's breath caught. Bria's face drained. My father went rigid. Crane stood up fast. Your Honor, Judge Kessler raised one hand without even looking at him. Sit down. Crane sat. The judge kept reading. It further states, he continued, voice steady, that Hannah Price has the decedent's permission to reside in the home and that any attempt to force her out prior to probate shall be treated as bad faith interference. My mother's lips parted. For a second, she looked genuinely confused. Because this wasn't the story she'd planned. This wasn't the version where I was unstable and she was protecting family property. This was a legal document written by a man who knew exactly what they were trying to do. Judge Kessler looked up. Ms. Price, he said, do you understand what you just triggered? My mother's voice came out sharp. That's not fair, she snapped. He was manipulated. Hannah was always in his ear. Stop, the judge said, and it wasn't loud. It was worse than loud. It was final. You do not get to call someone incompetent. After this court just watched him clearly state his name, his intent, and his fear of your actions. He turned slightly toward the bailiff. Bailiff, he said, I want those phones sealed and logged. Immediately. The bailiff collected both devices and placed them into evidence pouches with the same quiet efficiency he'd used earlier, like he'd done this 1,000 times. Bria watched her phone disappear and made a small sound in her throat like an animal caught in a trap. Then Judge Kessler did something my mother had not prepared for. He looked directly at Nadia. Counsel, he said, I am issuing an immediate protective order concerning the residence. Ms. Price, he nodded at me, will not be removed from the home pending proper adjudication. Any attempt by any party to change locks, shut off utilities, or harass the occupant will be treated as contempt and referred for criminal enforcement. My chest tightened. Not relief exactly, but the sensation of a door locking behind me. And because my family's favorite weapon had always been access. If they couldn't touch my living situation, they couldn't control me. My mother's attorney tried one last play. Your Honor, we object to a protective order based on an unproven allegation. Judge Kessler cut him off without blinking. It is not unproven, he said. It is documented. With video, with logs, with filings. Your client walked into this courtroom with unclean hands and now wants the court to pretend it didn't see the dirt. Then he looked at my cousin. Ms. Donnelly, he said, you whispered threats to the petitioner in my courtroom. You snickered while a fraudulent eviction petition was pending. And your phone number appears as verification for a filing you now deny. If you have an explanation, you will give it to law enforcement, not to me. Bria's voice cracked. I didn't. The judge's eyes hardened. Do not speak. Bria shut her mouth so fast it looked painful. Judge Kessler turned to the clerk. Ms. Patel, he said, mark this matter for referral. I want the district attorney's office notified today. Yes, Your Honor, she replied immediately. My mother's face twitched. Anger, panic, humiliation, all fighting for space. You're doing this because you feel sorry for her, she snapped at the judge, and the audacity of it made the gallery finally react. Soft gasps, murmurs, shock. The bailiff stepped forward automatically. Judge Kessler didn't raise his voice. One more outburst, he said, and you will be held in contempt. My mother's mouth opened, then closed, because even she could feel how close she was to being dragged out. Grant Vela stood again. Your Honor, he said. There's one more thing. The judge looked at him. Go ahead. Grant nodded slightly toward the screen. Mr. Price didn't only document the fraudulent filing, he said. He documented what they tried to do next. The day after the petition was filed, he received a locksmith quote sent to his email requesting a lock change on the residence. My mother's head snapped up. Grant continued, calm and precise. The quote included the requester's name and the phone number. It matches Bria Donnelly. Bria's breath hitched. The judge stared at Bria for a long beat, then looked at the bailiff. Add that to the referral, he said. Then he said, colder. Because that's attempted unlawful eviction. My cousin's earlier hiss, enjoy your homeless life, echoed in my head, but it didn't feel sharp anymore. It felt desperate, just like a bully's last line before the adult walks in. Judge Kessler gathered the papers in front of him and spoke like a man who was done being used. Here's my ruling, he said. The emergency petition is flagged as potentially fraudulent and is being referred. The protective order stands. The petitioner remains in possession of the residence, and any party who violates this order will face immediate sanctions. He paused, eyes scanning the room. And now, he added, we address the will itself, with counsel present and with the court fully aware of what happened here today. Crane swallowed hard. My mother stared straight ahead like she was trying to hold her world together through force. The judge nodded at the clerk. Call the next exhibit, he said. Ms. Patel clicked. A new file began to load, and its title line appearing at the top of the screen, long, formal, and unmistakably official. And the moment it appeared, my cousin's face collapsed completely because she recognized the name of the document before it even finished loading. Then the courtroom doors opened quietly behind us, and a woman in a dark blazer stepped in, showed her badge to the bailiff, and said in a calm, clipped voice, I'm Investigator Reyes with the District Attorney's Office. I'm here for the phones and the verification logs. When Investigator Reyes said District Attorney, my mother's entire posture changed. Not outrage, not performance. Calculation. Like she was scanning for an exit. Reyes didn't stride in dramatically. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need attention to control a room. She carried a slim evidence envelope and a small clipboard. No big gestures, no threats, just procedure. Judge Kessler nodded toward the bench. Investigator, he said, you're here sooner than expected. Reyes gave a small professional nod. We were notified by the clerk, she replied. Potential fraudulent court filing, verification tied to a phone number present in the courtroom, and evidence preservation in progress. She glanced at the bailiff. I'll take custody of the devices and printed logs. The bailiff handed her the sealed evidence pouches and the stack of fresh printouts. Reyes checked the seals, initialed the chain of custody form, and slid everything into her envelope like she was filing away a storm. Bria's breath came out in a tight, shaky exhale. My mother stared at that envelope like it was a coffin. And Judge Kessler looked back down at the screen as the new file finished loading. Now, he said, the will. The title line was formal, long, and clean, but the words that mattered were simple. Last will and testament. Crane stood as if standing might revive his confidence. Your Honor, he began, regardless of collateral issues, my clients are the decedent's children. Judge Kessler cut him off. Counsel, he said, collateral issues are when a party's feelings are hurt. This is not collateral. This is attempted manipulation of the court before death. We proceed carefully. He turned to Grant Vela. Mr. Vela, authenticate the will. Grant did, calmly, efficiently. He explained execution, witnesses, notarization, capacity. He referenced the recorded video. He referenced the updated plan after the fraudulent petition. And then Judge Kessler read the key provisions aloud. Not all of it. Just the parts everyone had come to fight over. The residence, he said, eyes on the document, is devised to Hannah Price. My mother's head snapped up so fast it looked painful. Bria's mouth fell open. My father blinked like he'd been slapped. Judge Kessler didn't look at them. He kept reading. And a cash bequest to Lorna Price in the amount of... He paused briefly, then continued. $10,000. My mother's face twisted, disbelief turning into fury. And to Dean Price, he continued, $10,000. My father's throat moved. He looked at my mother like he wanted to ask permission to feel something. Judge Kessler's pen tapped the paper once. And to Bria Donnelly, he said, $1,000. The courtroom made a small sound, an involuntary ripple of shock. Bria turned red, then pale. That's, she started. The judge lifted his eyes. Do not speak, he said. My mother couldn't help herself. This is fraud, she snapped. He was manipulated. She got to him. Judge Kessler's voice went cold. Ms. Price, he said, You will stop. My mother's shoulders rose as if she was about to explode. He wouldn't do this, she hissed. That house is family property. Grant Vila spoke before Nadia even needed to. Your Honor, he said, Mr. Price did do this, and he did it because he was attempting to protect Miss Price from exactly what we just watched play out today. Judge Kessler nodded once. That aligns with the record, he said. Then he looked down again and read the line that turned my mother into stone. Any beneficiary who contests this plan or attempts to remove Hannah from the residence shall be deemed to have disclaimed their interest. My mother's lips parted. She made a sound, half laugh, half choke. Crane stood abruptly. Your Honor, we have to contest. Judge Kessler's pen lifted. Counsel, he said, do you understand what disclaimed means? Crane swallowed. It means they get nothing, the judge said, flat. Silence slammed down. Bria's hands shook slightly. She stared at my mother like she'd been tricked into standing too close to a fire. My mother's eyes darted around the courtroom, searching for someone, anyone, who would give her a narrative to hide in. But the narrative had already been replaced by something stronger. Paper, video, logs. Judge Kessler leaned forward. Ms. Price, he said to my mother, your actions today have already triggered a referral to the district attorney. If you continue to contest this will in bad faith, you will risk not only your inheritance, but additional legal consequences. My mother's voice came out sharp. So, you're threatening me now? No, the judge replied. I'm warning you. He looked at Crane. The will is admitted, he said. The personal representative appointment stands. The protective order stands. Miss Price, his gaze flicked to me, remains in possession of the residence. Then he looked at the bailiff. If any party approaches her on the courthouse grounds, I want it documented. The bailiff nodded. Judge Kessler's gaze moved to Investigator Reyes. Investigator Sta, he said, you have what you need. Reyes nodded. For now, she replied. Then she turned her eyes on my mother and cousin with a calm that felt worse than anger. Ms. Weston, Ms. Donnelly, you will both be contacted. If you attempt to delete anything else, if you attempt to threaten or retaliate, you will make this case easier for us. My mother straightened, trying to recover pride. I haven't done anything, she snapped. Reyes didn't argue. She simply said, okay. And that single word, delivered like a closing file drawer, drained the power out of my mother's performance. Outside the courtroom, the hallway felt colder. My mother rushed toward me anyway, forgetting the judge's warning, her face twisted with rage and humiliation. This isn't over, she hissed. Too low for most people to hear. I will ruin you for this. Nadia stepped between us instantly. Back up, she said, voice sharp. Ow, and the bailiff, already watching like the judge ordered, moved in. Ma'am, he said to my mother, step away. My mother's eyes flashed. She stole. Step away, he repeated. Bria hovered behind her, voice shaking. Aunt Lorna, please, stop. My mother snapped her head toward Bria. You're useless, what? She hissed. Bria flinched like she'd been hit. Then my father spoke. Quiet, finally, the voice of a man who'd been hiding behind his wife's aggression for too long. Lorna, he said, it's done. My mother turned on him, but her rage had nowhere to land now. The court had already decided who she was in that story. Not the victim, the problem. Over the next weeks, the consequences didn't fade into family drama. They got heavier. The district attorney charged my mother with attempted fraudulent court filing and perjury-related offenses tied to the petition. Bria was charged as an accomplice for the verification and the locksmith attempt. Their phones were forensically extracted, and the deleted activity didn't save them. It proved consciousness of guilt. A judge issued a no-contact order for both of them against me. Violating it would mean immediate jail. And because the attempted eviction was tied to the court filing, the DA pushed it hard. Not a slap on the wrist. Not a warning. My mother accepted a plea that included probation, restitution, and a suspended sentence that would become real time if she violated any term. Bria didn't get off easy either. She was ordered into supervised probation and community service, add-on with an explicit warning from the judge, one violation, and she'd be remanded. My father didn't escape consequences, but his were different. He had to testify, to admit what he knew, to admit what he allowed. Watching him do that felt less like revenge and more like a truth finally forced into daylight. As for the house, I changed the locks the same day, with the protective order taped inside my folder. I installed a doorbell camera and a security system. I moved Grandpa's inventory list into a fireproof safe. And when the first threatening letter arrived at my mailbox, Nadia forwarded it straight to Investigator Reyes. The threat stopped after that, because threats don't work when every line gets logged. The first night after the hearing, after the HUD, and I sat alone at Grandpa's kitchen table, the same one from the video, holding the key he kept hidden under the pantry shelf. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed. Because the thing Bria wanted most wasn't the house, it was watching me lose it. And she didn't get that. A month later, the home felt quieter. Not because the grief was gone, but because the fear was. I still missed Grandpa every day, but I no longer felt like I had to defend my right to exist in the space he left me. The court's protective order held, the estate was secured, and the people who tried to weaponize a judge to make me homeless learned the hard way that the court remembers what families try to bury. If you were in my position, would you have stayed silent and let the record speak, or confronted them the moment they threatened you in court? Tell me in the comments, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.